Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of East Cambs District Council Planning Committee. Before we start properly, we have a fire safety information from Jane Webb.
Thank you, Chair. If the fire alarm should sound, can you make your way out of the building by the nearest available exit, which are the stairs you may have come up, or the fire escape around the back. The fire assembly point is at the front car park by the exit barrier. Thank you.
I'd just like to, not all members of the public have been here before, so I'd just like to explain to you what's going on. The people who are sitting along here and the two of us here, we are elected members and we will be the people making the decisions. The other people here are senior officers from the district council and they all have specific roles, but they will not be part of the decision making. We would try and go about 2 hours before having a comfort break. If anybody is particularly desperate, would they put their hand up, but we'll try and make it so it ties in with the agenda items. There are toilets out the back here and you're welcome to help yourself to some water, and also if you're only interested in one item, one that's been dealt with, you're obviously free to go. So we'll now move on to the agenda proper, and apologies and substitutions.
Thank you, Chair. No apologies today.
Or no, obviously no substitutions. Members, any declaration of interest? No. Thank you. And is there any reason why I shouldn't sign the minutes of the 4th of October as being a true record? You've read them, I hope, and but there's no one got any criticisms or things. Okay, so I will sign those later. I just remind both members of the public, officers and members, that there is an extra planning committee meeting on Wednesday the 15th of November here, and with obviously a bus in the morning as usual, and the meeting will be at 2 o'clock. So if you make sure you've got those in your diary, it would be helpful. So we now move on to item number 5, and will the officer now present the application?
Thank you, Chair. Just a few updates to give committee through you before I start on the presentation. Just 2 minor corrections to both the report for this item and the next item. Firstly, the reference to the MPPF in both of the reports is dated 2019, whereas it should read 2023, which is the most recent version, so apologies for that. And also, since the reports were drafted, the council has adopted some small changes to the local plan, meaning it should now correctly be referred to as the East Cambridge Local Plan 2015 as amended 2023. Neither of those updates has any bearing on the conclusions of the reports or the recommendations made to committee. Secondly, members will have seen the planning committee update sheets, which details concerns from a local resident, which were received after the publication of the report. The concerns are in respect of the location of some of the affordable homes on both phase 1, which we'll look at first, and then phase 2A. My only response to those concerns is that our housing team supports the provision of the affordable housing as shown on the most recent plans. And I don't agree with the criticism of their location. And if members would like me to get into that in any more detail, I'll be happy to take questions on it later. And since the publication of the update sheet, we've also received an objection on behalf of the British Horse Society. The objection itself runs to 2 pages, but essentially focuses on the lack of bridleway provision and connection to public rights of way within the scheme. I don't intend to read the entire objection, although if members want me to, I'll be happy to do so. I'm not persuaded that the issue of the bridleway provision is one which should weigh heavily in the decision making for this application. And were this issue to be factored into the design of the scheme or made a requirement, this would have needed to be done at outline stage when other elements such as the Ness Road connection and the Burwell to Exning foot and cycle path were required. And again, if members would like the entire objection read out, would like me to go into more detail, I propose to do that after my presentation. So moving on, members will have seen that both the reports coming up were drafted as update reports to the previous reports to committee, which was referred to the August Planning Committee, where committee deferred the applications for more work to be done in respect of specific issues. And my report focuses on those issues as an update, but should obviously be read in conjunction with the previous reports. And my presentation will be more limited and will just focus on the changes that have been made since August committee. So the phase 1 application site again, and on an overhead photo, and I'll just quickly buzz through this. This is just some site visit photos of the site as it is at the moment, obviously stripped back and ready for development. And the proposed site plan, the layout of which has changed in some areas, which I will come on to. And just a render of that is the central sort of open space on phase 1, just to give members an idea of how that has changed. The main considerations remain the same as they were for the previous consideration of the applications. I won't list them all, but they're there on the screen for members. And in terms of the August committee deferral of the phase 1 application, members expressed concern and deferred the application to give the applicant the opportunity to address the issues that you can see there. So those were issues of overdevelopment, lack of sufficient 1 and 2 bedroom houses, lack of sufficient green space, and then visitor parking was raised as an issue during the debate. So unallocated parking, but it wasn't actually detailed in the resolution committee voted on, but I will show you how that has also been addressed by the amended scheme. So to summarise the main revisions, 5 dwellings have been removed from this phase, and we'll see on the phase 2A 5 dwellings have been removed from that. That was in an attempt to address concerns about the layout of the phases themselves and also the balance of development across the wider site, with phase 3 to come at a later date. So this phase now proposes 138 total dwellings out of the 350 that are permitted in the outline scheme. There's been a substantial reduction in the number of larger 4+ bedroom market houses from 51 to 34, an increase in 2 bedroom market houses from 2 to 15, an increase in the size of the central open space in phase 1, and also an increase in visitor parking spaces. So in how the scheme seeks to address the concern around overdevelopment, 5 dwellings have been removed, as I said. There's also, with the move to use more smaller properties as opposed to the larger ones, that has created a more spacious layout, more room for landscaping. As you can see, the density is now approximately 32 dwellings a hectare, and that's about 13 dwellings per acre, which is in line with the outline development plan drawing. And as I say, the revisions have allowed more central green space, which has doubled. So if I just point you to that, the previous scheme had a sort of wedge-shaped open space there, about 425 square meters. The revised scheme there has got a much larger central open space, which is now 900 square meters. And obviously that's in addition to the open space and play space, which has been provided on the wider site as part of the earlier infrastructure applications. And also to aid our understanding of how the first two phases fit into the development of the wider site, the applicant submitted an indicative site-wide master plan showing one way in which phase 3 could be brought forward. So members can see that there. So this is the top portion of phase 1, which we're talking about now. And then this is phase 2A, which goes further around the corner. And this is the phase 3 land. And they've obviously sort of provided an indicative layout with the self-build plots that are coming in phase 3, and then other housing development as part of phase 3 on the southern portion. It's important to say this is just an indication of how development could come forward, given the concerns that there were both from officers and from members about the balance of development on the site and how the wider site would come forward. And I think it's fair to say from an officer's point of view that has allayed our concerns on that. Another concern that came up from committee last time was the market mix, which members will recall was fairly heavily skewed towards larger 4+ bedroom dwellings. And I won't go through all of those figures in detail, but a lot of the, or a good portion of the larger houses have been substituted for smaller 2-bedroom houses. And if you look at the bottom right-hand table there, you can see that the percentages are now much more in line with the SHMA range that we would expect in terms of market houses. So again, slightly under on 2-bedroom houses, slightly over on 4-bedroom houses, and bang on the maximum for 3-bedroom houses. But as I said last time, the SHMA does allow a level of flexibility to take into account local circumstances and other issues, and we are now much more content with the market mix, which obviously officers identified as a weakness last time, and members also expressed concern about. So officers were content with the level of open space that had been provided, but it was a concern that members raised, and in response to that, the applicant has doubled the central open space, which you can see again there. And the removal of some of the dwellings and the use of smaller dwellings, as I said, has allowed for that, and also for some additional street planting. And as you can see, overall, the scheme is well in excess of the requirements in respect of the provision of public open space. And just turning to car parking, as I said in my introduction, this wasn't a reason for deferral given for phase 1, but it was something that was raised in debate by members, that there was a concern about an under provision of unallocated visitor parking. That has been increased by 8 spaces up to 26 total. The policy requires up to 1 space per 4 homes, and you can see there that it's gone from 1 in 8 homes in the previous submission to 1 in 5 here, so getting very close to that sort of maximum suggested level of visitor parking. And also members just be aware that the allocated parking, so on-plot parking for dwellings, exceeds quite substantially the 2 spaces per dwelling requirement, and you can see there the total car parking provision is 353 spaces for 138 homes now proposed. So just turning to the final sort of planning balance and our recommendation. Officers did previously note weaknesses in the scheme. In our recommendation to you at the August committee on the previous scheme, we felt that the scheme was acceptable, but I suppose it wasn't a sort of full-throated recommendation of approval, and committee obviously deferred the application given its concerns. Again, the developers engaged with us to try to address your concerns, and we are now of the view that we can give our full support to the scheme as it's been revised and is currently proposed. You can see there that we think the issues raised by committee have been addressed, and that we now are of the view that the revised scheme represents a high standard of design, which was what members were striving for at the in considering the August applications, and it still complies with the local plan as a whole. So we're recommending that members approve, or give us delegated powers to approve, I should say, today. So thank you for that, and happy to take any questions in due course.
Thank you very much indeed. That's, I think, answered a lot of the questions which we as members had. We've got an objector, Elizabeth Bruce. Would you, Miss Elizabeth Bruce here? No. And we haven't got any letters or anything, okay. Right, well, we've now got Rebecca Smith on behalf of the applicants. If you'd like to come up, we've got 5 minutes. The amber light will come on at 4, and I'd like you to close as near to the 5 minutes or less that you can. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to reintroduce myself, I'm Rebecca Smith, Senior Planner at Vistry Homes. We are the applicants for the Reserve Matters applications for phases 1 and 2A at Millstone Park, Burwell. As Dan has set out, following August Planning Committee, we obviously had to reflect on what was debated. We've worked with officers to agree some considerable changes to our proposals to address the concerns raised by members of this committee. As Dan has already clearly set out, so I'll try and be brief, we have significantly amended the market housing mix in terms of the amount of 2 beds and fewer 4+ bedroom new homes. Overall, the scheme for phase 1 comprises 73% 1 to 3 bedroom homes, along with maintaining quite a high level of affordable housing. We've incorporated the further open space and landscaping to enhance the green infrastructure within the scheme, which this obviously, as Dan said, complements the wider infrastructure that's already got Reserve Matters approval, and actually what Vistry will in part be delivering in terms of the wider open space and play areas. And I think through our work in terms of pulling together that illustrative master plan, I hope that we've mitigated any sort of residual concerns on how the wider site can be brought forward under that existing planning permission. And I'm quite happy now that we can agree, the officers agree that we have a high quality scheme. We as Vistry are very keen to get building on site. We have been delayed, and we want to be delivering these new homes for people next year. So I hope members can concur and support the officer's recommendation for approval. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Now, questions to the applicant members. Was Lavinia first? There we are. Okay. Councillor Akinwall, I believe you were first.
Thank you, Chair. And there's a few questions from the last meeting regarding questions that were raised at the last meeting. I recall Councillor Christine raising the issue of wet rooms provided for larger properties. Has this been addressed? I do recall it is this satisfactory answer in the last meeting. So the wet rooms issue, has that been addressed?
Okay, I do, yeah, recall Councillor Ambrose Smith raised the need, I think particularly in where we've got accommodation for to support older population, people with disabilities, that type of thing, especially when it comes to our affordable housing. So we tend to be led by our registered provider in terms of what that internal specification is. So that may indeed include things like wet room in the ground floor masonettes. We have on phase 2 introduced a couple more bungalows as well, which at the moment they are equipped with, they are M43 building reg compliance in terms of being wheelchair adaptable. So they do have things like them, the wet rooms already built in. So I think in part we have, but we are guided by other parties that get involved in terms of affordable housing and what their requirements are.
Thank you. So the second question, in regards to the play areas, you mentioned the play areas in the public open spaces. Can you specify where on the plan the play areas will be on phase 1 and phase 2A as
Yeah,
well?
sure. So do you want to start? So in the bottom south east corner, there's an entrance village green, which already has reserve matters approval, and that includes a natural play. So that's got, I think it's sort of 3 pieces of, say, your logs, your boulders, that type of sort of just informal play for the younger children. Then to the northwest, we have what will be the main sort of play area for the site, for this portion of the site. So that's an integrated local equipped area of play, a leap, that's got at least 5 pieces of equipment in there. So they're the nearest 2. But obviously we've got the 3 additional open space areas within the parcel for recreational leisure purposes as well.
Thank you. Are these play areas accessible for children with disabilities and SEND needs as well?
Yes, I think, again, this is something that was raised at the last committee,
Yeah.
which I've fed back to our commercial team. Obviously, the play area equipments already have reserve matters approval in terms of their detail, but it's definitely something we work with our suppliers to ensure. I think, like I said, like the roundabouts are the accessible ones. We've got a swing that's the accessible. So there are some equipment built in there.
Thank you. And the last question, in regards to the public parking spaces available, what's the proportion of electric charging points in the parking space for the visitor parking spaces?
So the visitor parking spaces won't be equipped with electrical vehicle charging points. All our new homes will have that provision though.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Edwards.
You said you're very keen to make progress on the site if it's approved. At the moment, it's an eyesore as you come into the village, and it's been sitting like that for a number of years now. Do you have any date when you'll be able to get on site if it's approved?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the outcome today. Obviously, we've been gearing up to start on the site for a good year or so in terms of gearing up our supply chain, our subcontractors to get on site. So as soon as we've also probably got some pre-commencement conditions just to sort out as well, but definitely as soon as we can in the new year, because we are forecasting some completions for next year.
Thank you. Councillor Chicken-Valley actually took my question away from me, but since I'm here, it's good to know that there's a reduction in housing, although 150, 143 is not much of a reduction actually. And I'm glad all the other things have been done. I can't remember what my substantial question was. Oh, well, never mind. Okay, fine.
So Councillor Trapp, that's it. Okay, Councillor Holtzman.
With regards to the play spaces, I'd like to ask when they will be built on schedule in relation to all the houses.
Yep, so this is secured under the Section 106 legal agreement appended to obviously the outline planning permission. So my understanding is that it's tied to the phases. So for our phase 1, I think it's and this is the last date, by 80% occupations, that play area has to be in place. Obviously for us, we have to bear in mind health and safety, construction routes, where we put our compound to make sure when we can open play areas, but it's something that we try and do as early as we can in our programme.
Okay, we had Councillor Trapp as remembered his question.
I have, but once again, Councillor Holtzman has taken it out of my mouth.
Right, okay, did I see another?
This is terrible. Thank you, but thank you.
Councillor Lay.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to ask, what form of heating were you going to put into those properties?
Yep, I think you asked the same thing last time. So at the moment, there will be gas boilers. We'll be building to the latest building regulations, so they will be supplemented with PV solar panels on all houses. We know it's very likely that we will be constructing some of the new homes under the Future Home Standard, and that will definitely then see air source heat pumps being brought into the development. We are working at the moment with the registered provider for the affordable to see if we can, if there is capacity in the wider network to put any more earlier air source heat pumps into properties. But that's where we're at the moment.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks, Rebecca. If you bear with me, Chairman, it's not a question, but I'd just like to place on record my thanks to you and your colleagues for the positive way you engaged since the last committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dan. Oh, come back again then.
Thank you. More questions. With regard to the gas heating, will you put in infrastructure in those houses that will allow later upgrade to air source heat pumps?
Yeah, so I've been informed by our group technical team that the pipe work that goes into the properties have been sized larger, so they can accommodate a transition from gas boiler to air source heat pumps. There will be obviously, if a property has a store cupboard, that might then have to hold the plant for that air source heat pump. So that there are considerations in what we are building at this stage.
Dan, you've got some comments to make, or have you?
I don't think I have anything to add at this stage, Chair. Obviously, I did say in my introduction that I was happy to get into things that I raised as updates, but I don't have anything else to say. I'm just happy to take members' questions if they've got any.
Members, Gareth Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. You said there's 26 visitors car parking spaces. Whereabouts are they?
All around. I don't know if I've got a plan which I will be able to point you to them. Just bear with me a sec. I'm going to have to strain my eyes and see if I can pick them up off this plan, but they're sort of just dotted around as in various areas to try and kind of spread them through the development so that they serve as many of the, as many of those locations as possible. I do have maybe if I forward maybe to the parking, I think I might have put a parking plan up there. Is that going to be an issue? Not really is the answer. They're spread fairly well throughout the site. They're either generally on this phase in single spaces or sometimes in two, and the idea being just that, yeah, they're provided across the site so that they serve as many of the houses as possible. And as I said, there is an over provision of driveway parking across the phase, so that obviously if people have visitors, there are houses with 4 parking spaces plus a garage, again, just to try and kind of provide.
Could I just
parking.
interrupt there? I think what you're trying to ask, Councillor Wilson, is you didn't want to see them all in one place and you wanted to see them spread around reasonably among the whole
That's
site.
exactly it. So the answer, that's spread around to places.
Which I think that's probably been answered now.
Otherwise, they'll people will park on the road if they can't park close to where
I
they're.
think I was reading your mind. Councillor Trapp, I understand you've had another flush.
Yeah, I have. But are you going to read my mind as well? No, it's. But Rebecca Smith mentioned about and Councillor Holzman about the play area. Is there any? I think the answer was as soon as possible. Is there any kind of condition one can be imposing on when that play area is being to be constructed after so many houses have been built or something? Because that's one of the things that as people are moving in, they really want to see the play area and use it.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Trapp. Yeah, I think Rebecca might have touched on that. There is the timing for the delivery of infrastructure, including the play space, which is kind of off the parcel, if you see what I mean. So to the north, west and southeast is dictated by the Section 106 agreement that was signed in respect of the outline permission. And it's based on the number of completions. So I don't have it in front of me. I think Rebecca said 80%, and I've got no reason to disagree with that, although I couldn't swear to that. But it will be based on, as the scheme comes forward, as it starts to get completed, this play space will be delivered. And as Rebecca said, there has to be some regard to other construction activities, or the main construction activity that's going on site, in terms of when it's sort of safe and feasible to provide that. But yes, it is something which is taken into consideration, but it's not really within the gift of committee or officers now to change what's in the Section 106 agreement.
Okay, is that for you to speak?
I went to the debate.
Oh, right, okay. Members, any more questions? Okay, so we now move on to debate. And this is where you can tell us what your thoughts are. And I don't know who's going to kick it off. Hold on. Yes, that's right. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to kick off on this one. I very strongly welcome the changes that have been made. I'd like to thank, I couldn't make the August meeting. I'd like to thank committee members for raising the concerns that they did. We've since had positive reaction and engagement with Vistry. I particularly welcome the reduction in the number of 4+ bedroom dwellings and the increase in 2 and 3 bedrooms. I'd also like to refer members to the comments from Burwell Parish Council, where they thanked this council and Vistry for getting together and coming up with a much better scheme. And their parting comment was, let's get cracking with it. And if nobody else wants to, I am more than happy to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation.
Right, so we'll continue with the debate, but I've got it logged in that you're proposing that we accept the officer's recommendation, and it is now Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I'm happy to second the resolution. I think it's a big improvement, and I'm very glad that developers have actually listened.
Okay, well, I'll make a note of that. Other members' debates, of course, away you go.
Thank you, Chair. I'd also like to thank the developers for listening to the council's concerns and doing the slight changes that were needed and listening to us. And I'm very happy to approve this modified development now, and very happy that we were listened to.
Okay, so I'll take it that you've declared what your view is. Other members' debate. It wouldn't be complete without your comments.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you, actually. Yeah, I mean, it is a reduction. I think I mentioned earlier, it's not a very significant reduction. And we've still got a huge acreage here. There's 20, sorry, I'll translate it to you, Chairman, 67.5 acres of land altogether. This is 11, just almost 12 acres. So with something like 20%, I think, no, but which is, and whereas the housing on this is actually more like 36% of the total 360. So I'm just wondering, and we've seen other plans as well, presumably there's going to be a lot more green space on the other phases. Is that right?
This is a question.
Well, I'm just thinking that this is quite highly developed. The rest of the space is actually very underdeveloped.
That's a comment.
That's a comment. It's a comment. Yes. Yes.
It's a comment. Dan, I will allow you to speak at this time.
Yeah, I'm happy just to go into that bit if you'd like, Chair. I think the looking at the overall site area, the outline permission dictates where the development parcels that we're looking at, 2 of those 3 today, where they go. There's a large easement on the eastern side, which can't be developed. There is a large area of sports pitches on the southeast sort of quadrant of the site. And then there is the sort of structural landscaping around the north and eastern boundaries. And so I think the question of the area of development across the site, or the amount of development on various areas, that is something that's been dictated by the outline permission, and we were obviously happy with that at the time. The densities now proposed, 32 for this phase and 31 for the phase 2, is very similar to what is around locally. The Felsham Chase neighbourhood, I think, is slightly lower than that, but in terms of modern densities, this is relatively low and about what we would sort of expect for a kind of village edge development. So we're content from that point of view. And as I said, the outline permission has driven a lot of that, of those decisions around the parcels, the areas of landscaping. So it is going to be a very well landscaped site.
I'm getting a feeling that there isn't a lot of opposition to this. I'm assuming that its members are generally in favour of this application. Am I correct in that assumption? I can't see anybody objecting. We do have a proposer, which is Councillor Brown, and he's been seconded by Councillor Wilson. And it would be, as I believe it, Councillor Brown, to be as in the agenda under item 1.1. So I think we'll go to a vote, and that has been seconded by Councillor Wilson. So you're just confirming that. Okay. Well, those in favour of this proposal, please raise their hands. Okay. Will those who are against this proposal please raise their hands? Okay. And will those who are abstaining please raise their hands? So what is the numbers there? So on the basis of 9-2, that application is approved. And we'll now move on to item number 6. And Dan, it's you again.
Thank you, Chair. The same updates really as I mentioned for agenda item 5, which I won't rehearse for members now, but as I said, happy to take any questions on those after the presentation. So agenda item 6 is the phase 2A application, deferred at August committee for reasons for which I'll come on to. And amended now to 133 dwellings across this phase. That is the parcel that you can see there in red. And on an overhead there relative to the Felsham Chase neighbourhood to the west. The new proposed layout, which I'll point out some of the sort of key changes shortly. And an updated render of the sort of crescent of houses around the central public open space area. And again, the main considerations today are as they were in August. And as I said, this was again deferred at August committee. To give the applicant opportunity to address members' concerns, and the identified issues were overdevelopment, poor housing mix, poor quality layouts, lack of sufficient green space and landscaping, and parking provision, which was actually part of the resolution in respect to phase 2A as one of members' concerns. So the applicant has provided a revised scheme for phase 2A, which is an attempt to address members' concerns. 5 dwellings have been removed from this phase, so it's now 133 total of 350 across the wider site. A reduction in the larger 4+ bedroom market houses from 49 to 28, an increase in 2 and 3 bedroom market houses that you can see there. The applicant has replanned 2 of the denser areas on the site, which were the Mews courts as they previously were, kind of adjacent to the Spine Road, which I'll come on to. They have also increased the widths of verges and kind of corners, entrances into streets to allow more tree planting, more of a greening of the site, and again, an increase in visitor parking spaces. So in terms of addressing the concerns of overdevelopment and the issues around the layout, 5 dwellings removed, use of smaller properties has allowed for a replanning of the denser areas, which are, there's 2, I've just got example of 1 here. So this is a kind of Mews Court area as it was, accessed internally along quite a formal road here, with sort of flat over garage and a lot of parking. It's been reworked to allow so it's now accessed from the main Spine Road, much less dense, some more street landscaping and a less formal sort of street that now results more centrally within the site. As I just mentioned, the density for this site is now 31 dwellings a hectare, about 12.5 per acre, commensurate with the surrounding area really, and relatively modest in terms of modern standards, I would say, and consistent with the outline permission. I won't go into too much detail again on the indicative master plan. I've discussed that in respect of phase 1, but again, we are content that this has addressed our concerns around the balance of development on the site and how later phases might be delivered in a way which presents a high quality, holistic development of the wider site. In respect of concerns about landscaping, more street trees have been added. That move towards smaller dwellings, slightly fewer dwellings, has allowed for houses to be set further back from the street. So for example, previously quite hard up against the secondary Spine Road, whereas now pushed back to allow some more tree planting. So you'll now have a kind of double avenue almost of trees down the secondary road, which I think is a big improvement. And generally across the parcel, as I said, corners have been widened. There's additional tree planting. And as I pointed out with the previous excerpts of the plans, that there is a more informal street structure in certain areas as well. In respect of the market mix, as I said, there's many fewer 4-bedroom houses now, with an increase in the sort of medium and smaller houses. And again, if you look at the bottom right-hand table there, you can see that the current percentage is broadly in line with the SHMA range in terms of minimum and maximum percentages. Again, 2-bedroom dwellings slightly under, 4-bedroom dwellings slightly over, and the 3-bedroom dwellings at the maximum that the SHMA recommends. And obviously we've said there's flexibility within the SHMA, and those differences there are kind of within the tolerance we would expect. And going back to visitor car parking, unallocated parking spaces have been increased by 6 to 26 spaces. We're now at the same sort of level that we've had on phase 1, which is 1 in 5 against a kind of up to 1 in 4 from policy. And again, on this phase, the allocated parking on plot for dwellings quite significantly exceeds the 2 spaces per dwelling recommendation of the council's adopted parking standards. So you've got an additional 85 on-plot spaces. And the total parking provision is 377 for the 133 homes. So we're content that that would address the parking needs of this phase of the development. So yeah, planning balance and our recommendation. Again, when we previously recommended this to members, it did come with some caveats. We said there were weaknesses within the scheme. I think members identified those and some others. And the applicant has been very willing to engage with those concerns, and I think has provided a revised scheme which addresses the weaknesses that we'd found and the concerns that members had expressed. And again, we're now of the view that the revised scheme represents a high standard of design quality, complies with the local plan. So again, on this application, members, we're seeking your approval to give us delegated powers to approve the application once we take care of those drainage conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I don't know, I don't believe Elizabeth Bruce has arrived. No, she's not. And so Rebecca Smith, would you like to just come and make any additions you feel that have been missed out? You've got 5 minutes to tell us about
you.
it.
No, I think Dan's very clearly set out again how we've taken on board the comments, the concerns raised by committee members in regard to phase 2A. Again, there's significant amendments to the market housing mix, the introduction of the more green infrastructure, landscaping on site, more visitor parking. And again, hope we can agree that it's a high quality design. So really, it's if there's any specific questions on phase 2A, I'm happy to take them.
Members, oh, I believe you first, Councillor Wiley.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a quick question. In regards to phase 2A, would there be another play area on this phase as well?
So for phase 2A, the main play infrastructure is to the north. So that already has reserved, it's not shown on this plan, I think it's on our illustrative master plan, already has reserved matters approval for junior and toddler play, and that is different type of play as it's a trim trail. Some more linear play spaces along that boundary, and there's obviously quite a generous amount of open space. We do have the woodland walk open space, linear space that sort of connects the two play areas together. So obviously quite, in terms of walking distances, quite a vast majority of phase 2 is in walking distance of that leap on the Melton Fields, the one I talked about previously, and then the northern portion of that site's obviously got is more easily accessible to that Millstone Park play area.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Trapp.
Thank you. Will the affordable housing be mixed in with the rest? Is it going to be, or is it going to be in a separate area?
Yeah, so as we do with good design and all new developments now, is that clustering of affordable housing. There's a maximum that you tend to put. So we have, particularly on phase 2, I mean, you can see it on the plan, but it's indicated by a little red AR or SO for affordable rent shared ownership. But there's like a cluster of 15 down in the south, and in the middle portion, there's another cluster of 6 or so, and then you go further north. Because phase 2A, it's an awkward sized parcel and there's 40% affordable housing on this. So you do maybe have more of a concentration of the affordable along that top section.
Right, it's a bit of a shame then. It is sort of constraining them to areas, the affordable housing.
It's in part because obviously they have to be managed by a registered provider. So that tends to be why, from a design perspective, they get clustered together. Obviously, they are, in terms of design, indistinguishable from any of the market housing. And also on here, there's a lot of design considerations in terms of where we needed to put, say, the larger properties because of design considerations. So there's a balance to be had, and I think we've got it. It works pretty well on this site.
Thank you.
I believe that's, oh, do come in.
Thank you. Is there a reason why you have agreed to change the Elmsley homes in their internal layout on the 2A plot, but not on the other plot?
So on phase 2A, I don't believe we've actually plotted the Elmsley house type. That might be an error. I think we've used the Cooper, which is a 3-bed, oh no, sorry, the Asher, which is a 3-bed, 5-person house on phase 2A instead.
Okay, so you made that change.
We made the change on phase 1 because we had, I think we had 5 of those Elmsleys where we've removed the ensuite from the bedroom to allow the bedroom sizes to be appropriately sized to meet as far as possible the nationally described space standards.
Okay, but that problem doesn't exist in 2A.
I don't believe we have, I think we've used a different house type on phase 2A.
Thank you.
Members, any more questions for the applicant? In which case we will go to the officer. Have you got anything else you'd like to say to as a result of the questions that have been asked?
No, not significantly, Chair. If members would like more detail about the sort of spread of the affordable through the site, I have got a plan that I can show them where it is. But I mean, from our point of view, it's pretty well spread out. You've got small clusters of up to 10 possibly in various areas, but they are interspersed with market dwellings, and I actually think it's a pretty good mix through the development. Yeah, if you want me to point out where they are, I'm happy to do that. But other than that, I don't have anything else to add.
Okay, members, we now have questions for the officer. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. In both cases, we've been looking at the play area, which is on the screen. It's the bottom left-hand corner is a play area. But it doesn't actually appear to be in either of the areas that we're actually giving planning permission for. And how are we actually going to give planning permission for that play area to be a play area? How is that working?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Wilson, through your chair. Yes, the sort of bulk of the play areas, the equipped play areas, are off parcel, but they are within, as you can see, within the wider site. Both the play area that you can see on that drawing in the bottom left-hand corner and the sort of trim trail play area, which is off plan to the north, benefit from existing reserve matters applications. So they've already been approved, but not yet delivered. So those are already permitted as part of infrastructure applications that we dealt with prior to looking at these reserve matters for the housing parcels. So they were set out very early on in terms of their location, and again that reflects the development master plan that was approved at outline stage. So they've come forward in the areas that we suggested they do when the outline permission was already granted, and they're already approved. Yeah, so benefit from permission as it stands at the moment.
Councillor Trapp, I believe you wanted to ask.
Yeah, I'm slightly confused by all these phases. We've got phase 1, phase 2A, phase 3A. Does that mean we're going to get a 2B, 2C, 3B, 3X? I mean, is there any significance in the fact that they've got A's and behind 2 and 3?
Yeah, I think the reason for that is the outline required a phasing plan to come forward prior to us looking at any reserve matters applications. We have agreed a phasing plan. It has, we've had various iterations of it as, you know, development has, the proposals have solidified, I suppose, and how they would be delivered. The reason for the numbering the way they are is that the infrastructure applications for roads, play areas, open space are included within that numbering. So phase 2 would be the northern open space. I think phase 0 was the main spine road, and and the sort of more southern play spaces. And again, off the top of my head, phase 3, I think, is the sports pitches, and phase 3A is the other housing parcel. It could be the other way around on that, but those are numbered to reflect how they would be coming forward. So yeah, there's no more housing other than the phase 3 that I identified on the site-wide master plan.
Okay, so that's what I really was trying to get at. So it's phase 3A, phase 2A, and phase 1 are the housing.
Correct.
The rest are for benefit of citizens, residents,
Correct.
however you put them. Thank you very much.
Councillor Rose Smith, you're next to ask your question.
Thank you. Possibly Councillor Travers already dealt with this. The upkeep of the play areas, will these be under East Cambs control? Burwell Parish Council? We're Burwell, aren't we? Yes. Or would this be under a maintenance company that looks after the entire site? What I'm getting at is, will these play areas be considered to be available to all parts of the community, or are they specifically for these interlocking estates, and it's not envisaged that they will be available to other parts of Burwell?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Ambrose Smith. I think to answer the second part of your question first, it would absolutely be envisaged that these play spaces, open spaces, would form part of the wider community and provide benefit to the wider community. Particularly, I suppose, the two. Well, no, there's for the northern open space, there's a link through to Ness Road, which I think we talked about last time. So obviously there's going to be other people moving through the site, not just residents, because that will form a useful link with Newmarket Road and Exning. In respect of the play areas to the south, they're along Newmarket Road. There's pedestrian entrances at both kind of ends of Newmarket Road. And so people will make their way through the site, can come and use those play spaces. To answer the first part of your question, the Section 106 agreement agreed with the outline permission includes what we call a cascade approach to the ongoing management and maintenance of the open spaces and play spaces. That requires that they are offered to the district council first, and then if the district council elects not to take them on, they would be offered to the parish council, and if the case is that neither council wants to take them on, they would be vested into a management company.
Can I just merely ask, because as I know as a town councillor myself, the upkeep or, replacement of play equipment is extremely expensive, isn't it? So, it is of a concern.
That is an issue, and the Section 106 agreement would also have provision in it for contributions kind of to the future management and maintenance of those areas if they're not vested within a management company, if either of the councils were to take them on.
Councillor Holt.
I know it's not within the envelope, but given that the other play space is to the north on the other side of the Spine Road, is there any sort of pedestrian crossing plan for that? Because currently the lovely woody walkway actually just kind of like gets you to the Spine Road and then not any further.
I don't believe there is across the sort of secondary Spine Road that runs here. I mean, I think it is. This is a road which almost just kind of runs out at that point. Like it doesn't continue through for vehicle access. You've just got pedestrian and cycle path access through to Ness Road. So I think the level of vehicle movements up in this area is going to be very limited. And from recollection, as part of the infrastructure, the road infrastructure up there isn't a formal crossing point, or at least not a marked crossing or signalised crossing. But I think that's unlikely to be a problem, just given the nature of the level of traffic that would be in that area.
Have we got any?
Yeah, just a small observation that widening corners on streets actually might increase the speed of vehicles as they go around the corner. So it may not be, it's beautiful. I much prefer a wider corner, but it just might be also encourage speeding.
Yeah, I think that when I say widening the corners, the actual radii of the corners hasn't changed significantly. It's more that houses are set slightly further back from streets, and so that enables some more landscaping. I think it's I mean, I suppose you might get slightly more forward visibility around a corner, but the design speeds on this phase, certainly within the past, the main roads are designed at kind of at 20 miles an hour design speed, and certainly within parcels, they're going to be very low speed roads generally. So I hope that wouldn't be much of a concern.
Thank you.
This is still questions for the officer. Okay, away you go.
So I had a look back at at our briefing, and I would like to have another question about the Elmsley houses, if that's all right, because currently it says for agenda item 6 that the Elmsley house is used in development, and it said that for the
Councillor, we have a time for asking the applicants. That's gone. We're now at the situation where you can ask the officer. There is a schedule here, and we can't. And the question should be through the chair. And I would say, please direct your question to the officer, if you would.
I apologize for the breach of form. However, it took me a moment to actually kind of like go back to my briefing material to react to that question. I mean, may I?
Okay. Rebecca Smith, would you come up and sit at the desk? And now, would you ask a question?
Thank you very much, Chair. So having gone back to the briefing material, it does say that the Elmsley house type is used in phase 2A, and that in phase 1, that was where the applicant said you would not change it. Could you clarify what the case is for both phases, please?
Yeah, I believe, and I checked with Dan, and I've just checked with our architect. So the Elmsley house type isn't on phase 2A. I think this is just where we've been discussing phase 1 and phase 2A together. I think that it was the Spears house type in particular that the housing officer queried previously on phase 2A because of the bedroom and occupancy levels. I've just also checked the approved drawings. I think we've just got the as I said, the Asher, which is another 3-bed, 5-person affordable house type that we do, is on phase 2A as this shared ownership property. But what I can say, if the Elmsley is on there, we will be doing the same house type with phase 1 and phase 2A. We wouldn't do a different type.
So does that mean on both phases it's 5 people occupancy home with 3 bedrooms?
Yes, it will be. If that house type, we've changed it to be that 3-bed, 5-person.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Have we anything you want to say before we go into the debate?
No, on that point, I think that was, I accept that is in my report for phase 2A. I think that was on the basis of something that was in a document around housing mix, as opposed to possibly something that was shown on plan for phase 2A. So I think that might just be a hangover from the previous iteration. And the comment from our housing strategy team applies to the Elmsley, but having a quick look at the plans there in detail, it does look to me like the Elmsley isn't used on phase 2A. And I think that was in my report because it's mentioned in a supplementary document that came in. But I think, as I say, there might just have been an error in that because it was as a hangover from last time. So.
Okay, thank you. If I'd just like to sort of make a comment to members. This is a very big application, and therefore, I think it's right and proper that everybody who wants to say anything gets that right, and that's what I will do. But please, if you can, make the questions at the time when when they're relevant. We now move on to debate. And before we start debating, I would just like to say how positive this has been so far. And I think it's an indication that if the applicants work with our officers, then progress can be made. And let's go on to debate now. Councillor Edwards.
Yes, I'd just like to agree with what you said, and everybody seems to both sides work well, and the problems from the August meeting, I seem to have been addressed as they can be. And I'd like to propose we accept the officer's recommendation.
There you go. Nice.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to second the approval as well.
I made a note of those two things. Councillor Lay.
Yes, I just wanted to say, I think on this occasion that we all have worked well together to come up with a solution that I feel very happy about, and I will vote in favour of this proposal.
Okay, have we more debate? Councillor Brown, I've missed you.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, because much has been said about play spaces, just to sort of allay concerns of committee if necessary. We currently have 3 sort of formal playgrounds in the village, one of which has very, very recently been completely refurbished at not insignificant cost, which is actually, and that one is actually easily accessible from this site, should the formal play bits not be there when the first occupants come in. So I'd just like to, if people have that concern, just like to allay them. And repeat what I said earlier on, I'm fully behind this.
Members, are we going to, it's already becoming fairly apparent to me that there's a general feeling here. Is there anybody who's likely to be talking up in opposition to this?
I won't be talking in opposition. I think the housing mix of 40% affordable is actually something that's greatly desired and needed. And I'm glad that for this site, for this phase, we're having that.
Okay, well, I think we have a proposal from Councillor Edwards that we accept the officer's recommendation as is in the agenda. Is that correct? And also we have Councillor Akinwale, who is prepared or wishes to second that exactly as in the agenda. Is that right, Councillor? That's right. Okay, so we have a proposal and a seconder. We don't seem to have anybody who is in opposition to this. So I'm going to ask the question in the first place. Will those in favour of the proposal please raise their hands? That's unanimous. Well, application is successful, and we'll just close from, just say nothing for a minute or two while some extra people take their seats. We've just been given some extra information. And with that in mind, I'm going to close the meeting for 8 minutes till 20 past. And you could, this is rather early, but we'll have a comfort break now and we'll rejoin at 3:20. Okay, they're now reopening that, reopening the session of the planning committee. The reason that caused that is we were given some photographs of the site, and the rules we have here is that all evidence should be with us by 10 o'clock on the Monday morning, so both the applicant and the objectors and the officers have the opportunity to look at those documents. This is a large development, and I felt it correct to maybe be a bit benevolent, but I would urge, and I've just instructed our senior officers here, but in future we will stick with these rules, and it will be 10 o'clock on the Monday morning, and then we will not accept any more evidence. It's not fair for anyone involved, I don't think. Anyway, Catherine, away you go.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. So agenda item 7 is an application that seeks permission for the residential development of up to 166 dwellings and identification of 9 self-build plots, open space and associated infrastructure for the previously approved 2019 application. My officer report prepared in advance of this committee meeting sets out in full the policy requirements for the application and discusses in depth the planning balance. And the purpose of this presentation is to give a brief overview of the main considerations and to answer any questions that members may have. So the map displayed above shows the outline of the site in red. You can see the development envelope of Soham in black. And the above image shows an aerial overview of the site. So the application, as I've already said, seeks approval for the reserve matters for 166 dwellings and identification of 9 self-build plots, totaling 175 dwellings. The proposal also includes open space and associated infrastructure. Outline consent was granted at this site under an appeal decision, which was held as a public inquiry in January 2022, and the outline consent secured the detail of access. The main considerations in relation to this application of the principle of development, affordable housing and self-build, residential amenity, visual amenity, highways matters, flood risk and drainage, ecology and climate change. So with regard to the principle of development, while the application site is situated outside of the defined development envelope, the principle of development has already been established through the 2019 planning permission, which was allowed at appeal. The reserve matters application has been made within the timescales conditioned, and therefore the principle of development is considered acceptable. Moving on to affordable housing, self-build and housing mix, the application proposes 30% affordable housing and 5% self-build properties, which have been secured via Section 106 legal agreement on the outline. The Council's housing strategy and enabling officer has reviewed the proposals and confirms that they support the application, as it will deliver 30% affordable housing on site and will meet the tenure of 77% rented and 23% intermediate housing in accordance with the approved Section 106. The applicant has confirmed that 5.6 hectares of open space is provided as part of the scheme, and the proposal also includes a locally equipped area of play with 6 pieces of play equipment. In terms of residential amenity, the outline application acknowledged that existing occupiers in the area are likely to experience an increase in noise and disturbance from the development, including traffic movements. However, it was considered that this was not considered to be significant, such that permission should be refused on that basis. The proposed site layout has been laid out to provide significant separation between existing properties and proposed dwellings, with areas of open space located to the rear of the property's fronting broad piece. The proposal is therefore not considered to create any overbearing, overlooking or overshadowing impacts to neighbouring properties. The appeal decision conditioned matters such as construction times and construction method statements in the interests of amenity, so that has already been dealt with on the outline application. And there are no objections from Environmental Health or the Environment Agency relating to odour from the Soham Water Recycling Centre. They advise that the applicant has taken into consideration the odour buffer zone and has ensured that the amenity of future residents has been considered adequately. The applicant has also submitted a noise impact assessment, which has been reviewed by Environmental Health, and they advise that a limited number of properties to the northeast of the site may, with open windows, intermittently experience noise levels of +3 decibels over the relaxed target for living rooms and +4 decibels over the relaxed target for bedrooms. from the potato store. Given the site constraints considered at outline stage and the subsequent permission granted by the planning inspectorate following the appeal, it's considered that alternative ventilation methods for instances of marginal intermittent noise may be acceptable in this instance for a limited number of dwellings. It's considered that the amenity of future occupiers can be adequately protected through the installation of mechanical ventilation for instances where this may be preferable to future occupiers, and the details of that can be secured by condition. In terms of visual impact, the scheme has 4 main character areas, these being the board piece interface, the central corridor featuring green space, the north cores which feature higher density development, and the settlement edge. Transitioning into open space. The majority of the development is 2-storey in scale, with some 2.5-storey dwellings spaced out within the site. Open spaces are landscaped formally and informally, with woodland elements to the site edges to soften the visibility of built form. The entrance to the site is curved and landscaped to soften the approach and visibility from Broadpeace, with development set back from the entrance. The design of dwellings provides variation, and while there are repeating house types, these are mixed within the site to provide interest to street scenes. The full details of materials can be secured by condition to ensure that these are appropriate, and dwellings have been positioned in order to naturally survey open spaces and turn corners, preventing blank elevations being present within street scenes. Boundary treatments and plot layouts have been considered to ensure that street scenes are not dominated by hard boundary treatments, and on balance, the proposal is not considered to harm local visual amenity, and the development complies with planning policy. In terms of highway safety, the site access and the road widening works have already been secured under the appeal decision. Within the site, dwellings generally have 2 car parking spaces each. Some plots benefit from garages in addition to 2 external car parking spaces, and where 1-bedroom properties are proposed, these have 1 associated parking space. Aside from plots 5 to 9 and 10 to 14, all dwellings are to be provided with electric vehicle charging points, and the parking layouts across the site are a mixture of side-by-side spaces and tandem spaces to reduce vehicle-dominated frontages. 42 visitor spaces are proposed in line with the requirements of policy from 8 of the local plan, and the Local Highways Authority has reviewed the application and raises no objections. In terms of ecology, the applicant has submitted a landscape and ecology management plan. Alongside the application, the report sets out a number of habitat creation proposals and conservation objectives, as well as setting out management for a period of 30 years. Natural England have raised no objections to the scheme, and the proposal has also been reviewed by the Wildlife Trust, who note that the ecological reports and biodiversity net gain assessment provided for the original application have been updated. They advise that the proposals still accord with East Cambs policies and nationally adopted planning policy for biodiversity, and they raise no objection, and those matters can be secured by condition. In terms of flood risk and drainage, as part of the appeal decision, it was conditioned that schemes for foul and surface water drainage would be secured by condition. The applicant has submitted information alongside this application, as well as by discharge of condition, as per the appeal decision. The lead local flood authority have advised that they have no objection to the proposal. Anglian Water have advised that the foul drainage from this development is in the catchment of the Soham Water Recycling Centre, and that it will have available capacity. They advise that the submitted layout plan is acceptable and accords with the Cordon Sanitaire for the Water Recycling Centre, and that the impacts on the public foul sewage network are acceptable. The Environment Agency have advised that they have no objections to the scheme. The IDB have been consulted and have noted that the details for the bunds and embankments to serve the attenuation ponds require further information regarding a construction material, and during the discussion over the details required, they've confirmed that those details can be secured by condition. So based on the information provided and lack of objection from statutory consultees, it's considered that flood risk and drainage can be adequately dealt with in accordance with policy EMV 8 of the local plan. In terms of sustainability, the applicant has submitted a sustainability statement which sets out a range of measures from sustainable procurement to waste management to water efficiency and heating design. The report sets out that the site's forecasted emission rate will better Part L 2013 by 31% and will exceed the requirements of EMV 4 of the local plan. The report also sets out that photovoltaic arrays will be used and the positioning of those can be secured by condition. So on balance, the proposal is considered to be in accordance with the outline permission for the site and has been assessed against both local and national policy. The proposal is not considered to create significantly detrimental impacts in terms of visual amenity, residential amenity, highway safety, drainage and flood risk. Benefits of the development are considered to outweigh the limited impacts identified, and the proposal is considered to comply with the policies within the local plan and the MPPF. The application is therefore recommended approval subject to the conditions that I've set out in my report.
Thank you very much indeed. We have a speaker in objection, and it's Mike Rose. You have 5 minutes, Mr. Rose, and an amber light will come on at 4. Please make sure you turn the microphone on.
Good afternoon, Chair. My name is Mike Rose. I'm a retired scientist. I live at Broadpeace, adjacent to the site. I also represent a number of Broadpeace residents. I apologise for the late submission of the photos and thank you for admitting them to the meeting. I'm here today to discuss the applicant's proposal regarding flooding of properties on Broadpeace, and you have seen some photos that I've circulated. We suffered yet again from flooding a couple of weeks ago. The topography of the site is such that there is a watershed running across its centre from northwest to southeast, 1 metre higher than the site boundaries, and that's where the site meets Broadpeace at the south. The southwest corner is particularly low where it backs onto Broadpeace Gardens. The soil structure of the site is topsoil with a clay substrate, meaning that once waterlogged, the site is very slow to drain. The applicant proposes to drain the north side to the north into the Cofton Drain, but not to drain the south side. Throughout the planning process, the applicant has been reluctant to take any measures at all to mitigate flooding of existing residence properties on Broadpeace. Under pressure, it has suggested the measures that you have before you today, which is a bund under shallow depression, which you've probably seen on the drainage drawings, to retard overland flow. While these measures will indeed retard the flow, they will not solve the problem of waterlogged land and will leave residents with a stagnant, smelly swamp. We have asked for piped-in drainage to be installed to take water away down to an existing culvert. This was recommended by the LLFA. The document dated 5 June 2023 contains the LLFA recommendation and the applicant's reply. The LLFA has recommended draining off-site. The applicant has refused to provide positive drainage, stating there is no publicly accessible watercourse. There is a watercourse present, and that we don't control the watercourse. We would suggest that the applicant could, if it wished, negotiate for access to that piece of land. The landowners have applied recently to register the piece of land, referred to as the track, but that has not yet appeared on the land registry site. The applicant then contradicts the above by stating that it will direct any residual overland flow around the bund to the existing ditch and track, which does exist, in a document dated the 14th of June 2023. The Internal Drainage Board stated on the 27th of January 2020, the board is still concerned over the flooding that occurs to the properties in Broadpeace from this land. This proposal must address this issue and intercept water captured on the site so it can drained away from the affected properties. Failure to address this problem now would be a missed opportunity. The planning inspector stated that a suitable drainage scheme can be achieved and the subsequent detail can be secured by planning condition. I have not found anywhere any calculations that refer to the current measures which we consider to be unsuitable for the shallow depression and bund. Without positive drainage, the scheme proposed does not give adequate protection to residents, and we respectfully request that it is not approved. We would also ask whether a condition could be added that any drainage measures that are carried out on the south side be completed before any other excavations are commenced on the site. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions? Councillor Trapp.
Thank you very much for that, and thank you for providing these photographs. Is it possible to find the location of these if the map were put up?
Yes, it is.
Catherine, would you be able to put the one, either that or something like that?
Yes, so the location of those photographs, you can actually see, if you look at the southwest side of the site, it's the boundary there. So I was standing in the west corner of the field of the site when I took those photographs.
So
But-
that's that photograph.
So that's those, yes, that's correct. The ditch that you see
Yes,
is the ditch that was dug by the landowners to alleviate the flooding.
and that's where along which boundary?
And that is all the way along where the red line is on the southwest side of the site.
Okay, so that's backing onto Broad Peace House.
Correct, yes, yes. And
Okay,
then the water then flows, if you look at the other photograph, that water is flowing down, and I think when I stuck a bucket in it, it's about a gallon a minute, second, I beg your pardon, a gallon a second, flowing down in line with the western boundary. So it's flowing down and heading down in an existing ditch to a culvert under the road.
but so these are roads
Those are roads and residence gardens,
and those are broad pieces.
and that's Broadpeace, the road, yes.
Well, that sounds pretty awful.
Yes.
It looks pretty awful, so not sounds pretty awful, looks pretty awful. Right. Thank you very much for that.
Have you any more questions for Mr. Rose? No? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We now have three speakers, Anne Dew, Rob Hill, who's a drainage consultant, and Ben Purdy from Persimmon. Would you all come up, please? And I don't know, you've got 5 minutes. I don't know which one wants to speak first. Probably the drainage consultant, I would have thought maybe. Well, it's your floor, so you decide what you want to do.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak today in support of this scheme. My name is Anne Dew, and I'm the Head of Planning for Persimmon Homes East Midlands. And as I've mentioned, we've got Rob Hill next to me, who's our drainage consultant, and Ben Purdy, who's Technical Director at Persimmon Homes. The site benefits from outline consent for 175 dwellings, including 9 self-built plots and 53 affordable dwellings. The outline consent approves vehicular access from Broadpeace alongside drainage principles, and this reserve matters application accords with this detail. We've been working with the case officer on this application for the last 18 months, with extensive discussion taking place regarding the design code, which has informed the design of this layout. The scheme provides for an extensive area of open space, which is well in excess of the standards required by the local plan. Substantial areas of tree planting and soft landscaping will be provided as part of the development, and this is particularly to the southern boundary with properties on Broadpeace. These areas, alongside generous separation distances, minimise any impact on residential amenity of residents on Broadpeace. The development will be subject to seal, with Section 106 contributions towards early years, primary and secondary education, highway improvements, libraries, and so on common land, all of which are secured under the outline planning permission. All technical consultees have confirmed, subject to conditions, their support for the application, as is detailed in the committee report. Obviously, concern has been raised about drainage and flood risk. And I will then pass over to Rob Hill to talk through these matters.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you, Chair and members. As Anne said, I'm Rob Hill, Director of Infrastructure Design Limited. I'm a civil engineer. I've been responsible for the drainage scheme within the site. As mentioned, there is an existing issue with flooding from the field into the properties within Broadpeace, and as well as representations from locals through the planning process, this was brought up as an informative from the LFA and the IDB. As a brief description of the works our client intends to undertake as part of the scheme, I would highlight the following items as measures which will help to reduce the existing flood risk to neighbouring properties. Of the field currently draining southwards, as Mr. Rose explained, half the site goes north, half comes south. Actually, all of the properties, all the housing drains to the north now. So approximately 50%, 55% of the development that drains south will now be draining to the north. The only thing that's left is the open space. And what we are looking at doing is, as mentioned, is providing a hollow to take in that any surface water off the open space, not from the development. The development itself will all drain positively. And then that will also be putting a bund along the southern boundary or the southwestern boundary to again further protect the properties from any overland flow. We will also, that open space will be planted and landscaped with trees and various meadow grass mix, etc., to obviously help with taking in the nutrients from the water. Obviously, at the moment, it's a ploughed field, which with little or no growth on it at all, which obviously will make things worse on overland flow. All of these works are within land which is within the control of our client and therefore can be delivered without issue. In planning terms, the scheme ensures that there is no increase in flood risk to adjoining properties from the development, and in fact will reduce the current risk in purely a catchment area alone by over 50%, and introduces further measures to control the pathways of any exceedance flow paths to the areas which have been already identified as a ditch course. Thank you.
I'm only here to answer any technical questions should they be raised.
Yes.
Ask you questions. Am I right in assuming that you're saying that you are going to the bottom half of the development as it's there is going to drain off to the north? And are you saying as a qualified water engineer that the risk of flooding will be reduced? I think I picked that up from what you said, that there'd be a reduced risk of flooding to the bottom end of the site.
Yes. Apart from the actual site entrance is all draining to the north. So that's all positively drained all to the north and is all designed to take a 100-year storm event plus 40% for climate change, plus a further 6% for urban creep. So all in line with the LFA requirements. The only residual bit that we can't positively drain is the open space, which is the sort of area just to the north of the Gardens of Broadpeace. And what we've done there is we've actually major earthworks to at least try and stem the flow if there is any overland flow from the open space itself.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Trapp, this is question.
Oh, I thought it was debate. Sorry. Question, Mr. Hill. You say, are you keeping this ditch, this additional drain that has been put in? And you're putting the bund on the other north of it, is that right? But then, so that will, fine, that's all the water's going to, half the water is going to go north and half is going to go south. So it's going to come down, it's going to hit the bund, then where it's going to go?
Well, currently what we've got is the north of the bund, we are actually reprofiling the whole of that open space so it drains backwards. So it shouldn't, in theory, it shouldn't actually ever reach the bund. It should actually be stopped before it gets there. We are talking about an overland flow. We are talking at the moment, obviously, with it being a ploughed field, which is, has no growth on it most of the time, especially during the winter. It's very much an overland flow, whereas obviously it'll be grassed, it will have various paths, etc., on it, which will hopefully take some of the water as it's flowing through anyway.
I like this use of the word hopefully. I mean, I think seeing these photographs, it is horrendous what is happening to Broadpeace. Admittedly, this is what, 3 years ago, but it must be with increased different weather patterns. So I'm not sure. Are you saying you're making a depression in the bottom so that it'll become a pond? I'm not quite sure about how you're mitigating this.
Obviously, in planning terms, we should be providing there should be no increase in flood risk to existing properties. Obviously, this is an existing flood risk. So we're not increasing the flood risk. We are trying our best to, within the parameters of the land owned, we're trying to quell any overland flow. It's not about flooding, it's about overland flow. Obviously, the photographs are showing it coming off the fields, but what we're saying is it's the more or less the sort of central open space that goes from left to right. Everything to the south of that is currently flowing towards Broadpeace. What we're saying is that only the left-hand part will.
Yeah.
And what we're also doing is, instead of it literally falling in a straight line from the middle to Broadpeace, we're actually reprofiling the soil so it doesn't actually fall from north to south. It will actually flow from north to the middle, but within the open space, and the water will be restrained there.
So are you creating a pond somewhere in that space in the middle? By reprofiling it?
It will.
I mean, a possible pond, putative pond, shall we say?
It's a pond insofar as, yes, maybe with the storm coming tomorrow, it may well be a pond for a week or so afterwards, but it's not an actual pond. Yeah,
but it's okay. So, and that is reprofiling the center of that.
Yeah, that basically that bottom corridor of open space is being reprofiled to ensure that there is not a direct gradient from north to south.
Because having the bund in there might put all the water going into the road, the access road, and then onto Broadpeace, unless you have some kind of
no, indeed, that is obviously the road could have potential for flooding. We can't stop flooding, unfortunately. All we can do is try and mitigate against the results. So what we're trying to do is, if it is going to flooding away from properties and not cause damage to properties, it will go through corridors that will be able to take it. And obviously it will come down that road and will then cross Broadpeace and into the
creating scenes like this.
That is the existing situation. Obviously, what we're trying to do, what we are hoping that we'll do, it will improve.
But Mr. Rouse, so I may mispronounce your name, said that there was a drain the other side of the road and that could be used. Is that right? As part of the overall scheme, and Ben actually probably could.
In essence, what we're trying to do, in the events where there is flooding, we are providing on-site storage for those extreme flood events with a large depression. I can't remember the cubage, 800 cube of storage for the worst case events. So the flooding doesn't appear in the gardens of Mr. Rose and his neighbours, and it does hold within the development curvature, and then dissipate through infiltration over a long period of time. And that will hopefully overcome the existing issues that the residents are facing. And that's the strategy that we've taken, obviously, with the LLFA and the IDB's recommendation to proceed with.
Thank you very much.
So no, you were first.
Thank you, Chair. A few questions. The first question is, has the concern of the Ely group of internal drainage group dated October 17 this year been addressed in regards to the cohesiveness of the material used?
Yes, it's a technical nuance on the material being used, but yes, we will be addressing that within our detailed design. I believe that it's been agreed that it be done on condition.
I'll further clarify that for you in a second.
Thank you. Next question. Technical officer raised a couple of issues in March this year. The first one being there's no accessible bungalow on site. The second one, in terms of shared surfaces between pedestrians and cars. The third one being the locations of wheelie bins to be collected. The fourth being, have you taken into account the play area? and ensuring that the play areas are obviously accessible for kids with disabilities and SEND needs. We also have the access for wheelchair users, being able to access the toilets within their houses as well. Has that been all addressed?
Yes, we have addressed the majority of those. Probably the only exception being there are no bungalows on the development. But what I can say is all the houses are designed to the M42 standards, so they are accessible. In terms of the play area, obviously it's in an accessible location within the development, essentially along the east-west corridor. In terms of the equipment, certainly not all the pieces are going to be suitable for people with disabilities. We have submitted the details. We've not been asked to change them, but if members are minded that they would prefer for a different mix of equipment, we're more than happy to accept that.
Yeah, so I would like to make a suggestion or a motion to push for accessible equipment. We are looking to push for equipment that's able for kids and as well as teenagers with SEND and disabilities as well to be able to use the equipment going forward. And also the last question is, there were issues raised by the design crime officers in regards to external lighting. Has that been addressed as well?
Lighting hasn't been designed up yet, but will be once we get reserved matters consent, and then the details will be approved.
That's fine. Thank you so much.
Councillor Lay.
Yeah, mine's a simple question. The green area where you're going to create a ponding area for surplus water, have we made any regard to safety regarding children playing in that area? Because, you know, drowning a child in 6 inches of water is quite possible. Thank you.
Certainly, one of the things with regard to that is very shallow banks. So therefore, in that bottoms open space, it's a 1 in, I believe 1 in 10 bank, which normally we look at 1 in 3 banks for, you know, as being accessible or to be able to escape. But these are actually 1 in 10, so it's a very shallow bank, so it's easier to get out with. You know, it's not like a fall hazard as such.
Councillor Holzman.
So looking at the drainage design plan, there are 2 ditches at the entrance to the south side, and so those are just for the road there. So everything else drains north. Now you said that kind of like the water was both collecting in the bund on the southern edge, but also you said you'd landscape it, that stuff could collect in the middle. So which one would be the main water overflow?
As such, to call it an overflow is perhaps not the right phrase. It's overland flow potential from the exceedant storm events. So it's a case of the water. What we've tried to do is just stop the water from going literally from north to south straight into Broadpeace. What we've tried to do is just to capture it and slow it down with the depression, and then as a sort of an added bit, we put the bund as well. Really, all of it's there to try and assist in just keeping the water from going that north to south route.
Given that the extreme flooding events seem to be happen every few years and thus are probably not that extreme, but rather annoyingly common, it seemed to be trees planted in the bund area. Will they be selected to actually cope standing in a flood?
Certainly the landscapers would have designed it in conjunction with our own designs.
Is that the same for the middle where? Because like, I mean, if you're saying you're essentially planning an overflow bund in the middle, but that's not yet on the map. Do you expect that to actually act as a proper bund?
Yes, but
We're here to resolve an existing issue in terms of, so we're providing this attenuation area for an overland flow event. Trees will be planted, which are high water demand, so they'll take water out of the soil, obviously reduce the flooding potential impact onto Broadpeace. The trees can survive for periods of time. We're talking about an extreme weather event. We are looking at obviously 800 cube. It's not, you're not going to look at that thinking that's a pond. It's just a depression in the ground that will hold water. The landscaping has been designed so it's heavily planted in that area to take as much more water out of the soil as possible to relieve potential issues going forward.
And lastly, I'd like to second Councillor Lay's concerns about child safety. Having seen a toddler kind of like tip into a shallow bit of water and not being able to get themselves out, would there be an opportunity, would it be possible to actually at least provide some sort of hedging or fencing to these areas?
Yes, we could incorporate that, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Trapp.
Thank you very much. The planning officer, Catherine, mentioned that some of the properties won't have electric vehicle charging points. I thought that all properties now must have electric vehicle charging points and that these must be designed in at the beginning.
Just to clarify, it's the Castor units in the southeastern corner have got electric vehicle points, but they're bollard electrical vehicle charging points which are within the courtyard parking area.
So the bollard, I mean, the sort of little uprights.
Yes, that's
Is
right,
that
in the car parks,
sort of
the residents of those. units
Yeah,
will use
okay.
them.
And they will be, the electricity to them supply will be from their own houses, from their own electricity.
Answer that one, Ben.
Yeah, the two Astor blocks are affordable housing, so there will be some bollard feeder pillars that will supply electric, and that will be run by the RP who will manage those 2 units.
RP is
registered provider.
right, but it's more expensive to have it charging from a multi-use charger rather than from one's own charger, which is which is actually connected to one's own domestic supply.
We're not talking about a pod point where you pay 83p per kilowatt. This is a private residential one that will be the standard payment that you'd pay for your own dwelling. It's just the way it's designed up is it's supplied to a feeder pillar so multiple residents can use it. It's just the way that building regs requires it for apartments. These are maisonettes. So it will be fed off a landlord supply that's the housing association will manage, but there shouldn't be any adverse effect in terms of cost to the resident.
It shouldn't.
But
this is the crunch point actually. What will be the cost? But each of the maisonettes will have a parking place. Is that right? So why can't one have a pod point at each parking place, which is connected to the main supply of that house or that maisonette?
Yes, each resident will have a pod point. So if there's 2 spaces, one for one resident and another one, there will be one positioned out next to its parking bay for it to connect into. It's not a communal one, which you'll have to have a car share to a pod point. It's just a location. How it's fed through is by Building Regs Part S, which we'll have to comply with, and we will do. It's just how that power's come through. Whether it's connected to the plot itself or whether it's done by a separate feeder pillar, it's the same. The cost will be allocated to that resident. But it's just how we get power to it.
I thought it'd be much easier to actually connect it up from the maisonette directly. And therefore the owner of that parking place has control over who can charge there by just putting a switch on.
Yes, with communal parking courts, you can't run power cables under third-party land. So we've got the way that the plots are orientated is you've got primary accesses on the front and rear of the property. So to run power from the front of the property around the back to the parking court, you could potentially going through third-party land. So the way we overcome that is providing a separate feeder pillar, which is power supply, which is linked to that plot, and then it's connected to that EV charger.
but it's a question of charge, of cost, the cost of that,
Well,
to the actual charging point.
well, the charging point
E-
installed by.
Excuse me, gentlemen, we have a officer who wants to, I think, add
Oh,
something to
delighted.
this conversation.
Sorry to interrupt. In terms of electric vehicle charging points, it is a requirement under building regulations. So this is not necessarily a planning matter. I'm purely highlighting that this is what's being proposed as part of the scheme. In terms of the maisonettes at the bottom, they will obviously comply with the building regulations for that type of dwelling. So it's not something that really weighs against this application. I'm just trying to clarify for you that it's not a matter that would have.
Has that
significant
now
weight.
resolved this discussion? I hope it has.
Well,
Have we got any more questions for the applicant? We normally have one per member, but go ahead, please.
Thank you. I'd just like to ask about heating proposed for all of these developments. As in, is that going to be gas heating or?
We've designed up the scheme so we've secured enough loads that majority of the plots will be air source heat pumps. We are looking at the first few, if we get planning build next year, will be gas, but we are looking for majority of them to be air source, but we haven't finalised numbers just yet.
So for the houses on gas supply, will the infrastructure be in place for them to be later transferred?
Yes, the way we design the houses now is for adaptability. So the pipe work is increased. The residents will, if it's an air source heat pump approach they go through, if we haven't installed it, will be sized accordingly. And then the radiators just need to be enlarged due to the cooler water. But yes, they are easily adaptable.
Okay, I think we've exhausted you. Thank you very much indeed. You can return to your seats. We have now Anne Hoyt from Soham Town Council. Would you like to come up and address the committee? You've got 5 minutes. Anyone will do. And just make sure you turn the microphone on. Okay, away you go.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing me to just read the comments from our planning meeting on Monday. We always have the planning meeting last week of the month, and it doesn't always coincide with things here. I must say I wasn't there. So I'm reading it on behalf of Soham Town Council, and I've just received this morning. Soham Town Council reiterates all previous comments. And Soham Town Council continues to raise concerns regarding drainage and flooding to residents' properties on Broad Peace. This has still not been rectified. Noted a bund has been placed at the Broad Peace end of the site, but not all the way along the boundary. ECDC, that's East Cambs District Council, need to ensure that a responsible body takes over the maintenance and repairs of the drainage system once the development is completed. Otherwise, it will silt up and not work efficiently. This will cause flooding to the low-lying properties on Broad Peace. The last paragraph is slightly wrong because the planning committee used the national figures of the rainfall. And we had a heavy rainfall, 27th of October, as everyone knows, and the whole country suffered. Broad Peace didn't suffer as badly. We had a resident who measures rainfall on a daily basis on their rain gauge, and they measured 54 millimeters over 3 days, followed by 4 dry days, and then followed by 24 hours of 46 millimeters, at which time flooding occurred. So it wasn't a big
flood, a big rainfall for Broadpeace. So we hope that the applicant will consider this and look into mitigating these concerns. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you, Chair. And
I don't think the fact that you're reading out from something from Sarum Town Council, I don't think it's right for members to question you unless you want to be questioned.
I quite agree. I do not want to be questioned. I'm just reading. Thank you.
Okay, I assume that to be the case. So thank you very much indeed. And we now have a letter that's been given to us by Councillor Hogan, who was going to attend, but he's had a family issue, which means he can't. So I'm asking for the letter or his speech to be read out.
He's written, please accept my apologies for not attending today's planning meeting in person to raise the matters highlighted by the Middle Fen and Mere Internal Drainage Board, IDB. A hospital appointment for my mother requires I take her there. I would ask the planning committee to pay particular attention to the matters raised by the IDB in respect of the development 23000146 RMM Broadpeace, Soham, Cambridgeshire. As experts in the matter of drainage, they raise particular concerns as to certain aspects of Persimmon's plans, specifically the construction and continuation of the bund designed to provide a degree of flood risk protection. As the IDB are the experts in this matter, I will do no more than repeat the text they have submitted when commenting on the proposals by Persimmon. The Ely Group of Internal Drainage Board, 17th of October 2023, following the previous comments made in our letter dated the 9th of October to the LPA, the drawings attached to the email received from the LPA of the 10th of October have had material type 2B or 7A of table 6/1 of the Department of Transport specification for highway works added to the note relating to the construction of the bund. The note also continues to state that fill shall have between 20% and 30% clay content. The board previously commenting that fill with this clay does not meet the requirement that the material should be predominantly cohesive. Therefore, it remains that the note specification is considered unacceptable. 1, the use of material with a 20% to 30% clay content is not predominantly cohesive. 2, type 2B and 7A material only has a requirement for 15 to 100% by mass to pass the 63 micron sieve. It has no requirement for material to pass the 2 micron sieve. Clay has a particle size of less than 2 micron. Therefore, it follows the above, the material should have a requirement that is predominantly passes the 2 micron sieve. As a result of the above, it is suggested the specification as contained within the note contradicts itself and remains unacceptable in any event. He then goes on to quote condition 18, which is prior to commencement, the specification for the construction of the bund stroke embankments to serve the attenuation ponds shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the LPA. The bund stroke embankments shall be carried out in strict accordance with the approved specification prior to occupation of any dwelling, and the reason to prevent flooding by ensuring the satisfactory storage stroke disposal of water from the site in accordance with policies ENV2 and ENV8 of the East Cambridgeshire Local Plan 2015. I will leave it to our planning team to decide how best to get necessary improvements to the construction and specification for the bund from Persimmon, but ask that the planning committee make the necessary recommendations to planning officers to do this, please.
Well, thank you, and I don't think it's appropriate that there's any questioning of that one either. Catherine, you've heard what's been said, and now we're at the stage where it's comments from officers, so make your comments, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have a few things that I'd like to raise. So in terms of the comments received by Councillor Horgan, as per paragraph 7.50 in the officer report that I prepared, I've confirmed that the IDB have been consulted and that they noted that the details for the bunds and embankments serving the attenuation ponds required further information regarding the specification for construction. I confirmed in the report that I've had discussions with the IDB as to whether this can be secured by way of condition. They've advised that this is acceptable and have reviewed the wording of condition, which I've recommended to be appended to any grant of approval. For reference, this is condition 8 set out in appendix 1 of my report. And for clarification, the IDB's comments relate only to the use of a material. They do not form an objection regarding the principle of drainage, and I've confirmed that with them by phone today. In terms of drainage generally, we've been through extensive consultation with the lead local flood authority, the IDB, Anglian Water and the Environment Agency, and I do not have any objections from any of the statutory consultees. With regard to the Town Council's comments regarding maintenance of open spaces and drainage measures, the section 106 associated with the original outline application secures a cascade method for who will be responsible for taking those on. So the first point of contact is to approach East Cambs District Council as to whether we wish to take that on in terms of the maintenance. The second would be, hold on one second, I have it here. The second would be whether the applicant wishes to retain and maintain the SUDS land and appoint a management company. And the third would be to transfer the SUDS to another SUDS management company. So we have first refusal on accepting the maintenance of that site. I think that's all the comments that I wish to make at this point, but I'm happy to try and answer any questions.
Well, we're now at the stage where it's questions to the officer. So members, any questions? Councillor Trapp.
Thank you. The applicants mentioned the provision of some air source provision, some air source. Is it possible to secure some kind of minimum spec by the S106 agreement? Is that something we should be doing? Some could include 1% up to 70% or 90% or even 100%.
Sorry, just bear with me one moment. Councillor Trapp, in terms of the section 106, that's been finalised on the outline application, so that document is completed. We can't make any changes to that. The applicant has submitted a sustainability strategy alongside the application. Have you seen that?
Vaguely, yes. I mean, it's quite a lot to go through. But the point is if one says some are going to be air source heating, what does that mean? As I said, between 1% and 100%. Yeah, that's some, it's not zero.
So it's a matter that is controlled under building regulations.
But not the proportion of properties with air source. Isn't that a planning?
No, I'm being advised no.
It just doesn't make sense. The other thing is also, can we control something about the development of the attenuation, or not the attenuation pond, but the high flood risk pond? Can that be secured by, is that part of the agreement?
The maintenance.
The maintenance and completion of it.
So
it seems to be.
That's what, so all drainage measures are secured by condition on the outline application that they're implemented. And the maintenance, as I've just said, is set out in the section 106. And who would be responsible for that maintenance is a matter that is set out within the section 106.
But what about the objections raised by Councillor Horgan from the IDB?
So I've just clarified that for you. I've been in discussions with the IDB. Their objection relates to the use of a single material in the construction specification. So their objection is not a it's not an objection regarding the principle of drainage. It's purely in terms of the technical specification for construction. And that can easily be resolved by condition, which is what I've suggested appending in condition 18.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Councillor Lay.
Thank you, Catherine. As I understand it, from 2025, building regs will be altered to ensure that we put air source heat pumps into more properties, new properties. And I wondered whether or not, as a condition of this application, we could put in an amendment that says that we expect all new houses that are built in 2025 to adhere to the existing building regulations that are applicable for 2025. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm just clarifying with the planning manager, because I believe that as dwellings are being constructed, they would need to comply with the current building regulations. So as you move on, those houses would need to comply with what the current regulations are.
It seems they will be built in compliance. Did I see a hand up here? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman. In condition 18, it says that the bond will, and the material used will be as approved by the local planning authority, which is presumably us. And what's the procedure for making sure that this rather technical area of whether or not it's going to work or not is dealt with by sufficient expertise? Are we going to get some additional expertise in to make sure we're going to rely on the internal drainage board to work out what the material is? Because it seems to me that the conflict is, what is this bond going to be made of? Is it just going to be a lump of earth, or is it going to be something a bit more permanent?
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Yes, when that information is submitted, it would be submitted as a formal discharge of condition application, and we would then consult with the IDB. And I think in this instance, I would also run it past all of the other statutory consultees to make sure that everybody is happy regarding that detail. This is something that is relatively simple to resolve. It could have been done prior to committee, but we had this on the agenda already. And the comments were quite last minute. So that's the only reason that we've come to you with a condition today rather than it being a resolved matter. But it is relatively simple.
Okay.
Is that it? Go on.
Thank you. This time all in one go. I'd just like to ask, so the maintenance for the bond is for how many years?
So those details were all secured under the section 106. So I don't know whether legal can advise any further. Yeah, in perpetuity.
Okay, and no, that's fine. Thank you.
Right, I think we're going to go to debate. Away you go.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of discussion or questions has all been about the flooding. I think one point has been missed by the members here, a lot of it, is that the construction of these houses and the new drainage to take all the water to the north end from the houses is going to reduce the flooding by 55%. And in the field there, so you've got another 45% of what would be flooding, and then they're going to reduce it again by doing the earthworks and that. So what I'm trying to say is we concentrated far too much on the flooding if we're going to help reduce it in this discussion so far. And so with that in mind, I would like to approve and put my name forward as the proposer that we approve this.
So I've made a note there, and this is entirely the right situation to bring up comments like that, because we're now in the debate, and that's entirely right that Councillor Lay.
I think a thank you has to go to our planning department, because I am delighted to see with this development that the 30% affordable houses is split so much in favour of rented units. 41 rented units and 12 shared ownership. I just wish that across all the planning we do, that we get a higher percentage of rental units like we have on this site, because we definitely need them. Thank you.
Okay, any more for a debate? Well, we've got, as I see it, we've got Councillor Brown for you, is it?
Very briefly, Chairman, because in planning terms, there's no reason not to approve this. Therefore, I'm quite happy to, I don't believe Councillor Goodall's got a seconder yet, but I'm happy to second his proposal.
Okay, I'll make flooding and the drainage, and we've lost, to a certain extent, we've lost track of the fact that you know, this has been to appeal, it has been dismissed. The sort of LFA have no objection, and there's quite a lot of extra car parking spaces, more than the minimum, and it's already complying or will comply with the extra 10% biodiversity, which I think we would all be really quite keen. And of course, the area of open space is quite substantial, and I think we should take a broader look. And but nevertheless, I've got a proposer with Councillor Goodall and Brown as a seconder, but we're continuing the debate.
Thank you, Chair. It just to possibly add a condition in regards to play areas being accessible for kids and teenagers with disabilities and SEND needs. I think going forward, any new developer that's building houses at this scale should consider that in their future applications. You just a motion to add as a condition to the planning application. Thank you.
So you're looking for
the playground area to be accessible for kids with disabilities.
all children.
Sorry?
Is your comment that you want the
So the play areas, both for this application and for all future applications, to make sure that their play areas are accessible for kids with disabilities and
so
kids with
accessible and,
SEND needs.
as you asked the question there,
Yes, especially
safety,
for
which
the,
the applicant,
yes.
the applicant agreed to make the play area, or if there was any sort of pond, that it would be safe and secure. That was committed, and you're talking about accessible to all. Well, I'm sure it will be. I can't believe you're going to have a kids' play area and not let kids go and play on it.
I mean accessible for kids with disabilities.
Oh, you mean, okay, yes.
That's what I meant.
Yes, sorry, I
Yeah.
beg your pardon. I thought you were talking about people with less than so on. No, and that would be sensible, of course. And I'm sure the applicants have made a note of that. Now we've got the officer coming in.
Sorry, Chair, please could I just ask that if that is put forward on a proposal, that it's delegated to the planning department to produce the appropriate wording for that. I think we require 2 conditions in that respect in terms of the details of the play area and also the safety element of the attenuation basin. So if you could confirm that that's delegated to us, that would be
When
great.
we get to it, we'll get you
Yeah.
to fill in the dots and the crosses.
Thank you.
Now, any more? We're now on debate. Any more debate? No. Okay, so we have a proposal from Councillor Goodall, and you've heard what the planning officer has said, and so she is suggesting that the proposal that's in the agenda is altered very slightly to include her comments. Is that's correct? And so are you happy with that?
Yes, I am, Chair.
And Councillor Brown, are you acceptable with it? Is that acceptable to you?
I'm happy to delegate the wording to officers. Yep, perfect.
Okay, so we have a proposal. and it's as in the agenda, but with the caveat about the play areas, which were the concerns over here. Okay? So we're now, between councillor Brown and Christine, Catherine, you're okay to understand what it is. Would you like to read it out? Or would you
Well,
like?
we delegate.
It's delegated to the officers, okay. So with it, with the proposal being that it's as in the agenda, but with detail about the play area to be delegated to officers, would those people who approve of that, please raise their hands. And will those who are opposed to that, please raise their hands. And will those who are abstaining, please raise their hands. So that is 9 and 1. Okay. Right, well, that is then approved. Gentlemen, you may leave if you want. We'll just wait till we move on. We're now on item number 8. Before we just start item number 8, is there anybody who's keen on a comfort break? I don't think we've got a huge amount of work to do. But no one's keen on a comfort break. No, okay, we won't have one. We'll move on to item number 8 with the officer's report.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, and thank you, Chair. Oh, is that better? Can you hear me? Thank you. I'll shout. It's agenda number 8, which is change of use of land from agricultural to residential garden and the installation of a summer house and associated works and infrastructure. My presentation will go over the application, and if you have any questions at the end, I'm more than happy to answer.
Yes.
It's just listed. Well, just get it as close as you can.
Much
Speak
better.
into it.
There we go. I'll bring it as close as
Okay,
possible.
thank you.
Sorry. The plan shows the extent of the proposal outlined in red. The blue is also in ownership of the applicant. The next slide shows an aerial image of the application site, as pointed out. The proposal seeks to change the use of agricultural land to garden land and the installation of a summer house. The summer house measures 5.5 metres by 3 metres with an overall height of 2.4 metres. The plans show the area included within the curtilage, within the change of use and the siting of the garden outbuilding. The main considerations within this proposal is the principle of development, visual amenity, residential amenity, and ecology. The principle of development, Policy Growth 2 of East Cambridgeshire Local Plan 2015 states that outside defined development envelopes, development will be strictly controlled, having regard to the need to protect the countryside and the setting and of towns and villages. Development will be restricted to main categories listed within the policy and may be permitted as an exception, providing that there is no significant adverse impacts on the character of the countryside and that local plan policies are satisfied. The proposal seeks to change the use of agricultural land to garden land and the installation of a summer house, which is not an exception listed within Growth 2. As it's not listed an exception, the proposal is therefore contrary to Growth 2. However, paragraph 47 of the National Planning Policy Framework states planning law requires that all applications for permission be determined in accordance with the development plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. This is a reflection of the requirements of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act. The visual impact, or the visual amenity of the proposed change of use and siting of the summer house would have a minimal impact on the public realm due to its position at the rear of the host dwelling and its landlocked nature. The summer house would not be out of character in terms of materials and design for a domestic within a domestic garden, and would therefore have no considerable impact upon the visual amenity. The site is currently laid to lawn, and there is no physical boundary between the residential curtilage and the proposal site. Therefore, given the domesticated present in its current form, the addition of the summer house would not significantly alter the character and appearance of the countryside and would have minimal impact upon its existing habitats within the site due to retention of the hedging and trees. It is considered that the proposal would not result in any significant adverse impacts on the character and appearance of the area, nor result in significant harms to the countryside, and is therefore considered to comply with policies ENV1 and ENV2 of the East Cambridgeshire Local Plan 2015. Other considerations, it is considered that the proposal would not result in any adverse impacts to the residential amenity and will retain existing habitats. The proposal is considered to comply with all relevant policies, policies relevant to these considerations. Following balance, whilst the proposed development does not accord with policy growth 2, as it does not fall within one of the exceptions for development in the countryside, it would not cause any harm to the character and appearance of the countryside, which is a key aim of policy growth 2. Proposal is considered to be acceptable in all other aspects, including impacts of the proposal upon the character and appearance of the surrounding area, impacts to community of neighbours, and complies with all relevant local plan policies regarding those considerations. It is therefore considered there is no demonstrable harm would arise from the development. Summary and recommendation. The lack of any demonstrable harm to the country's, sorry, let me start again. The lack of any demonstrable harm to the character of the countryside, the lack of any other detailed harm and minor encroachment onto the countryside, this proposal would be considered acceptable as a departure from the local plan in respect to the strict application of policy growth 2. The application is therefore recommended for approval.
Thank you. We have Edward Clark from Cheffins. If you'd like to come up, Edward, I think you know it's 5 minutes, and switch the microphone on and the amber light will come on at 4.
Can you hear me okay? Sorry.
That's lovely.
Thank you, Chair and members. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the case officer for the useful dialogue prior to and during the application process and the well-reasoned and justified committee report, and express my full support for the officer's recommendation of approval. The land subject to this application forms part of the wider site known as Homefield, which was purchased by the applicant in 2022, on the understanding that the land in question was garden land ancillary to the host dwelling, and this was reflected in the sales particulars which accompany this application. Furthermore, an assessment of historic aerial photographs available on Google Earth confirm that the land has been used solely for garden land ancillary to the host dwelling in excess of 10 years without any detrimental harm to the character of the area and landscape. As you will have seen during your site visit this morning, the land is open to and connects with the existing residential curtilage of the host dwelling, and the site as a whole reads as one, with the equestrian paddocks to the north, providing separation between the residential curtilage and the countryside. It should be noted that the rear boundary is aligned with the rear garden boundaries of the neighbouring dwellings, and therefore not at odds with the natural divide between residential and the countryside. The proposal does not require the removal of any trees or hedges, but in fact, should planning permission be granted today, the applicant will continue to maintain and plant the garden, thereby continuing to increase the biodiversity of the site. This application also seeks the installation of a modern summer house, which the case officer has confirmed would not be considered to cause harm through overshadowing, overbearing, or loss of privacy through overlooking. And to conclude, the application has not received any objections or comments of concern, and the site's sustainability will remain unchanged. This application simply seeks to regulise a historic use and install a modest summer house, which would typically be allowed under permitted development rights. I reiterate my full support for the officer's recommendation of approval and trust the information will assist you in your debate. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Any questions for the applicant? Mr. Trapp.
Thank you very much. Will the summer house have any services such as electricity or water going into it?
No.
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 Right, thank you.
Well, that was actually going to be my question. I didn't know if there are any dimensions, but if there's going to be no water or electricity, then I think that answers that question. Members, questions for the applicant's agent? No, just sit there a minute. Have you got any extra questions you'd like to make? Members, have you got any questions for the officer? Members, we're now going into debate. Right, away you go.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to support the officer's recommendation to approve the application. Thank you.
So that is a proposal that we accept the application. And Councillor Ambrose Smith.
I think it seems to be a very straightforward case, and I would certainly like to support it, and I would like to second it. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Lay.
I should like to condemn the rest of the councillors here because this is my patch and I expected to propose this to be accepted and they have jumped in before me. So I admonish all of you. Thank you.
Well, I've also got a comment from Councillor Brown who would like to add to the debate.
Thank you, Chairman. And I particularly want to address this to the applicants. Unfortunately, I couldn't make the site visit this morning. And since the only bit that might be of any issue is visual harm, etc., I can't take a judgment on that, so I'm going to abstain. But I just wanted you to know that that's why I'm abstaining.
Okay, well, to the disappointment of the councillor,
I just wanted, I'm not sure it was correct, but I thought Wesley Waterless was in my ward.
I'm not going to have a territorial discussion
And I would be quite free for others to propose with properties in my ward. That is up to them.
This is something you can resolve outside this room.
I just thought to correct something.
Well, I'm sure you will do that outside this room effectively. Councillor Akinwale, you have proposed it, and you proposed it as in the agenda. Exactly that. And Councillor Ambrose Smith, you're seconding that exactly as in there. So all those in favour of the approving this application, please raise their. Okay, that's unanimous, isn't it? Oh, I beg your pardon. Those against the application, please raise their hands. No, those abstaining, please raise their hands. Oh, yes, of course. He announced that, didn't he? So that is now approved. You know, thank you for staying there while we made our decision, and I hope it wasn't too long for you. Yes.
Wait for the next one.
Okay, we now move on to item number 9. Cassie, away you go.
Thank you, Chair. I hope it's loud enough. Just move on to agenda item 9. Change of use of land to garden land and construction of a cart lodge. The application site or the plan above shows the extent of the proposal outlined in red. On the next slide, this is the aerial view of the site as pointed out. The proposal The proposal seeks to change the use of the agricultural land to garden land and the relocation of a previously approved cart lodge. The plan shows a close-up of the area included within the change of use and the new siting of the cart lodge. Above is a picture of the approved, above is the picture of the approved cart lodge and the plan of where it was previously located under an application in 2021. The cart lodge, as I mentioned earlier, measures 10.7 metres in length by 6.2 metres in width and has an eaves height of 2.2 metres and has an overall ridge height of 6.3 metres. The design of the cart lodge remains unchanged in this proposal. The main considerations of this application is the principle of development, visual amenity, residential amenity, ecology, highways and flood risk. The principle of development under Policy Growth 2 of East Cambridgeshire Local Plan 2015 states outside the defined development envelope, development will be strictly controlled, having regard to the need to protect the countryside and the settings of towns and villages. Development will be restricted to the main categories listed in the policy and may be permitted as an exception, providing that there is no significant adverse impacts on the character of the countryside and other local plan policies are satisfied. Proposal seeks to change the use of agricultural land to garden land and the repositioning of the cart lodge, which is not an exception listed within Growth 2. As it's not listed as an exception, the proposal is therefore contrary to Growth 2. However, paragraph 47 of the National Planning Policy states that planning law requires that applications for planning permission will be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. This is a reflection of the requirements of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act. Visual amenity. The visual amenity of the proposed change of use and the repositioning of the cart lodge would have minimal impacts upon the public realm, as it can be seen from the photo above and from our site visit today. Due to the vast amount of biodiversity enhancement within the site and the backdrop of the Rowan Rutherford factory providing an industrial screening, it would not be considered that the relocation of the cart lodge and the minor encroachment that this development has on the countryside would significantly harm in terms of visual amenity. It is considered the proposal would not result in any significant adverse impacts on the character and appearance of the area, nor result in significant harm to the countryside, and therefore complies with policies ENV1 and ENV2 of the East Cambridgeshire Local Plan. The other matters, it is considered that the proposal would not result in any adverse impacts to the residential amenity and will provide biodiversity net gain and is acceptable in respect of flood risk. Proposal is considered to comply with the policies relevant to these considerations. The applicant has also agreed to enter a section 106 has entered a section 106 to revoke the previous application or the previous position of the cart lodge, and also to retain it so it's remains ancillary to the host dwelling and cannot be occupied as an independent unit at any time. Planning balance. While the proposed development does not accord with Policy Growth 2, as it does not fall within one of the exceptions for development in the countryside, it would not cause harm to the character and appearance of the countryside, which is a key aim of Policy Growth 2. Proposal is considered to be acceptable in all other aspects, including the impacts upon the proposal upon the character and appearance of the surrounding area, impacts to community of neighbours, and results in enhancements of biodiversity and complies with all the relevant local plan policies regarding those considerations. It is therefore considered that no demonstrable harm would arise from the proposed development. Summary. The lack of any demonstrable harm to the character of the countryside, the lack of any detailed harm, and the minor encroachment on the countryside, this proposal would be considered acceptable as a departure from the local plan in respect to the strict application of Policy Growth 2. The application is therefore recommended for approval.
Thank you very much indeed. I assume that that's Mr. Mead sitting there. Would you like to come up to the table and You've got 5 minutes, and when you turn the microphone on, and an amber light will come on at 4 minutes.
Thank
Away
you,
you go.
members. I'll keep this brief because the last chap took my notes away with him. So, yeah, I think Cassie's done a great job at kind of demonstrating from a policy point of view and why we think you should support our application. But I just want to elaborate from kind of a personal point of view and also explain why we're actually putting a new application to move it not very far. So with that, to address that one, originally when we bought the property, we did our due diligence and found out where there's a high voltage substation on the site that feeds the factory next door. So we knew where all the cables were, but as it transpires later through the project, there is an older cable that wasn't on the original drawings and maps. So where we located it in our first set of plans, if we put it there, we would effectively have our floor took up if it needed to, if there was a fault in the power cable or something like that, which obviously isn't great. And also when we built the property and put the plans in originally, we looked at it and thought it was an old industrial building, and we weren't sure we could make it look very nice. So that's why we positioned the oak frame building in front of it to soften that impact visually. But the more we kind of carried on with the project and added cast iron gutters and arch windows that made out of brick and Victorian windows, the more actually it looks quite nice. And from the road, we get a lot of positive comments, and it kind of presents itself nicely. So the idea now of putting that building in front would seem quite a kind of would be a bit of a disappointment, to be honest. So while we have the opportunity to move it somewhere else, and actually a necessity because we don't have anywhere else we can put it, that's why we're putting in this application. And secondly, from a personal point of view, why we need the cart lodge on site, the application was actually through a Class Q application. So in terms of residential amenity space on the site, it was very tight to the property. So this cart lodge was our only kind of place to store bikes and have mowers and that kind of thing. And you may have seen on the site at the front, my wife is looking to start a flower farm. So somewhere to safely store mowers and equipment is really important. So for us to kind of thrive on the site and kind of make it all it can be for us, it's really important that we're able to build it. And just lastly, as a point, it's not kind of part of this application, but the site as a whole, we've put a lot of effort at the minute into planting a lot of mature trees. I think we've got close to 60 there already. And our plan is to plant probably around about 200 on the site. So if you have any concerns from a visual amenity point of view, I'm hoping over kind of a 3 or 4 year time frame, you kind of won't be able to see the property from the road anyway. Apart from the main road, we look to leave an avenue so people could appreciate the building from the road. So thank you, and yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Members, questions for the applicant? Oh, you're getting a competitor here, Councillor Knapp. So I think you were just a smidgen ahead.
Oh, well, short neck. Yeah, that sounds interesting. Fine. Is the access to the upstairs gym, which I really should sort of dissuade you from things like gyms. I mean, they're terrible things. Is that from the outside only?
It is, yeah.
So the door that is seen to the right of the garages is to a store or something?
It is to a kind of a shed store.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Akinwumi.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. It just in regards to the Local Highways Authority's suggestion on the 20th of September in regards to the plans and map updated, has it been done yet, or do you plan to do that in the near future?
So I think there was a bit of confusion, which the highways officer did kind of clarify that actually we weren't changing anything on the plan. It was just I think where the red line had been put was not correct. At the time of the original application, we moved across the main roadway by about 2 meters so the drainage board could access to clear the ditch out with their machine. And that was, I just don't think that was updated on the plan. So that's all been, from a highways perspective, there was nothing we were changing on it was quite simply moving the cartridge. So everything was as per the original application. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any more questions for the applicant? Okay, any more comments from the planning officer?
Just following up on the highways area, we resolved the issue. It was an issue with our mapping system online. It was actually the entrance or the access hasn't changed from what was previously approved. Thank you.
Okay, we now move on to questions for the planning officer. And I just have one, which is you're confident that you can make sure that that it's always a building that is linked to the main house, and that it can't be disposed of separately.
Yeah, so the applicant's currently going through Section 106 legal
So
agreement
that's
process, so
tidying that
it
up.
will be secured by the legal agreement rather than condition.
Okay, is that the last questions for councillor Trapp?
You mentioned there's an eaves height of 2.2 meters. Presumably that's the front eaves height because it's asymmetrical. Okay, thank you.
We're now going to move on to debate, but I've got councillor Brown who is keen to put his name at the top of the list.
Absolutely, Chairman. He who holds the pen, etc. Members, to me, this is an absolute no-brainer, and I fully support the officer recommendation for approval.
Thank you. I totally agree. I think that would enhance a lovely family home you've got there, and accept the officer's approval.
Thank you. Accept the officer's recommendations. So therefore, will those in favour of supporting that proposal, please raise their hands. Is that unanimous? That's unanimous, so you've got your consent. You don't even have to go back to the public gallery. You can. Planning manager might make some comment about agenda item number 10.
Thank you, Chair. Just to update on performance, you can see in terms of the targets on the top table there, where we're meeting all the targets, the corporate targets and the government targets. And then there's the workload tables. You can also see on the little graph at the bottom that 2023 was sort of bumping along quite a relatively low level of applications, and that's just reflecting the sort of reduction in activity in the economy relating to housing and planning. But there's just some other statistics that's just worth mentioning maybe. I mean, it's just been released on the monitoring report that there was over 700 homes built in East Cambs last year, and that's partly to do with the throughput of planning applications that the team have managed to do. And we've been looking at the what we call the backlog of applications, and there were 2,300 homes in planning applications undetermined in our department, which were there. And just to think about that, today you've just granted permission for 438 homes combined. So the planning committee's work is contributing to the maintenance of a 5-year land supply. So the sort of the bigger picture side of the work that you do when you grant these permissions. And if you think about what you did with Burwell there, we're getting extra quality into that form of development. Those are statistics that don't show up in these performances, but it's worth remembering from time to time. So those are the updates on performance, Chair. I'll take any questions. On the appeal decision that you mentioned in the briefing, Chair, perhaps best not to talk about a live enforcement case in a public meeting. So I'll brief you separately on that if I may.
That's fine. I've always been of the opinion that we had about 2,000 applications a year come into your department. Bearing in mind you're talking about 146 in September, would that look as though that's about where this year would end up at?
I think we'll be a bit lower. I mean, that this year, but you can see in 2023 that the top year was March when we got 200. But we're still getting, 100, well over 100 applications every month that we're processing. It's just that we're on the low side compared to recent years when you see 2021.
So it might be a quiet year.
Yeah.
And
But
it might be 1,500.
Yeah,
but It's still
exactly.
in the region of
Yeah.
1,500 to
But
2,000.
it's helped that slightly slowdown in new applications is helping us deal with the backlog of big applications that we received in recent years. So we're still busy, but dealing with applications we had for quite a long time.
Well, councillor Trapp, I'd forgotten you. You say so little.
The reason actually, if you look at the map, the diagram there, about apps received, it's actually got a false zero. It doesn't go down to naught, it's down to 100. So actually, if naught was included, it'll be actually fairly level all the way through. I mean, it'd be very little, it looks markedly different there because you've actually excluded naught from that. Or you don't go down to zero, but it would be.
Oh, yeah, that's a reasonable point. We're still fairly busy. We're just not as busy as we were in previous
Yeah, but
years.
it's marginal. It's
That's right.
within,
Yeah.
within. After this, can I just raise one single little point?
Why not? You've
Okay.
been quiet at all meetings, so now just go.
No fear of retribution. No, it's just I noted that sometimes in these case officers' reports, where there's a number of comments received from, shall we say, the local flood, LLFA or something, some of them put them in date order, and some of them put them with the last date first, and then can there be some consistency, do you think?
Yeah, I think that's worth looking into, and I think anything we can do to make the reports more readable and more accessible, we can do. We're undertaking a review of everything that we do at the moment in the planning service, and I think perhaps one of those things will be how we present consultation comments in committee reports. One, to make sure we're consistent, and two, to really highlight the key points so that perhaps members don't have to read absolutely everything in the reports in terms of all of the comments received from all of the consultees going back to the year dot, particularly in these applications that we've had for quite some time, and there's been lots of iterations. Really what you need to know is what's the latest advice on the key issues, so that when you come to these debates, you know exactly who's objected, who's not, what's been resolved and what hasn't. So yeah, we'll certainly reflect on that and look into that as we review the service.
I mean, the chronological history is interesting or useful sometimes, but also it'd be nice if it's one way or the other.
Yeah, sure. Understood.
Thank you very much for looking at sort of revising the ways it's going to be presented. I mean, I think the case officers are doing a tremendous job. I mean, you know.
I think it's a very valid point, actually, and I think we should have a standardization, and I would have thought the latest one at the top, and then you can see how it's built up to it. I think that's sensible. And just a reminder, members, that we have got the extra meeting on Wednesday the 15th at 2 p.m. and of course there'll be a planning bus in the morning, and you'll be told what time that is. But you have got hopefully a commitment on the 15th, and some of you may have already made arrangements. But if you can arrive, I would appreciate if you could. Thank you. This meeting is now closed.